The Scratched Warning by Michael Davis. Ever since I can remember, we had one of those vintage Parker Brothers Ouija boards sitting in our closet collecting dust. As a kid, I always wondered what it was. From the box, it looked like a boring board game, until one day I discovered what a Ouija board really is and immediately dug it out of the closet. I insisted my brother try it out with me and eventually got him to play along. We put our hands on the planchette, and I began asking the typical questions like, "Is there anybody there?" and "Can you answer me?" Other than my brother jokingly moving the planchette around to imitate an answer, there was no real response. After getting bored, we put the game back in the box. That night, I did some research to find out how to make Ouija boards work. Many people online said the best environment for using a Ouija board is a dark room, lit only by candles. So when my parents weren't home, I gathered 6 or 7 candles and convinced my brother to try it again. I lit the candles and set them around the table in the dining room with all the lights off. The flickering shadows danced on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere that made my skin crawl. We tried one more time. I asked again if there was anybody there. The planchette began to move. I told my brother to stop moving it, but he swore he wasn't. I told him to move his hand away, and he did. It kept moving. My brother thought I was messing with him, but I didn't pay attention. The planchette landed on the word yes. I was only 9, so I was genuinely terrified. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My older brother had to take over. He asked the question, "Are you a good spirit?" There was a 5-second pause that felt like forever. The room seemed to grow colder, and I could swear I heard faint whispers coming from the corners. Then my brother's hand moved with the planchette to the word no. We both looked at each other, our eyes wide with fear. At this point, I ran to my room and shut the door behind me, but he continued with the game. I huddled under my blanket, trying to block out the sounds from downstairs. Suddenly I heard his muffled voice from the dining room, and then I heard him scream at the top of his lungs. The sound chilled me to the bone, but I knew I had to check on him. I ran back downstairs to see what was wrong, my heart racing with each step. He was holding up his shirt, revealing a small open wound that looked like a claw mark. It was red and angry, as if something had just scratched him. He told me to set the fireplace immediately, and I obeyed without question. He threw the Ouija board into the fireplace and told me to never speak of what happened to anyone. The board seemed to resist the flames for a moment before finally catching fire. We have never used a Ouija board since. The Social Security Prophecy by Jake Thompson. I got a call from my cousin who said his brother, his dad, and his best friend were using a Ouija board in their basement. Before starting, they took a creepy porcelain doll out of the room and placed it face down on a pile of towels in the adjacent room. My cousin took a short break because the board was just spouting nonsense and he had to go to the bathroom. His dad, brother, and friend started asking the board questions without him. One of the questions was, who was in the other room? It just started spouting random numbers, and when my cousin came back, his brother said it wasn't working and they were going to put it away. He showed him the answer to the last question he asked, and my cousin said, "Dude, that's my Social Security number." The room fell silent and a chill ran down everyone's spine. How could the board know something so personal and protected? Then they started talking to whatever was answering them. It told my cousin he would die in the Air Force. At this point, they told the entity to prove itself. The planchette moved with unnatural speed, spelling out the word "da." They immediately got a bad feeling, like a heavy weight pressing down on their chests. The air in the room seemed to thicken, making it hard to breathe. They opened the door to check on the porcelain doll they had laid in the other room, and when they opened the door, the doll was standing upright in front of the door, staring at them with its lifeless eyes. Everyone freaked out and ran out of the house, their hearts pounding and adrenaline coursing through their veins. His best friend burned the Ouija board, and I think temporarily went nuts for a few months. The experience shook him to his core, leaving him paranoid and jumpy. My cousin, for some reason, then joined the Air Force and is on a base in Europe now. I can't help but wonder if the board's prediction will come true, and it terrifies me every time I think about it. As I reflect on this chilling experience, I'm reminded of a verse from the Quran that my grandmother often recited, "Say, I seek refuge with the Lord of the Dawn from the mischief of created things." Quran 113:1-2. It makes me wonder if seeking refuge in faith could have protected them from whatever malevolent force they encountered that night. Tomorrow's Warning by Brandon Miller. I had some friends over one night, so we tried out the Ouija board we found in someone's garbage. It had the board and the glass piece you hold onto. The four of us held onto the piece and asked silly questions, just messing around. At all times, one of us was moving the glass piece just to try and fool the others. When one of my friends went to the bathroom and the other got bored, it was just me and one of my other friends still holding onto it. I asked the board, "When will I die?" And the piece started slowly moving to the letter T. I kept looking at my friend thinking it was him, but he just told me he thought it was me. The piece then moved to the letter O, and then M, and then back to O, and then R. With growing dread, I realized it was spelling out the word tomorrow. My friend let go of it, and it stopped moving. I was convinced it was him, but he swore it wasn't him. The room suddenly felt colder, and I could swear I heard a faint whisper in my ear repeating tomorrow. But here's where it gets horrifying. The next day, while walking my dog to the preserve, my dog's collar suddenly snapped and he was free from the leash. He darted into the road, and I immediately chased after him, only to hear the horn of an oncoming car, blaring and getting louder. I dove as fast as I could out of the way, just barely grazing the car with my foot as it passed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. The smell of burning rubber filled the air as the car screeched to a halt. But it didn't end there. The same day, while sitting under the ceiling fan in the kitchen on full blast, I got up to get something out of the fridge. Behind me, I heard a loud crashing sound as all the glass on the table shattered and everything fell onto the floor. The fan had fallen off the ceiling, and I was inches away from being decapitated. The rush of air from the falling fan brushed against my neck, a chilling reminder of how close I had come to death. I really don't know if I find it to be a coincidence that the day after the Ouija board said I would die, the next day, I had two near-death experiences. All I know is I'm never touching a Ouija board again. The memory of those incidents still haunts me, and I can't help but wonder, was it really just chance? Or did the board somehow know? And if it knew about these dangers, what else might it know about my future? As I lay awake at night, replaying these events in my mind, I'm reminded of a hadith that says, "Whoever goes to a fortune teller and asks him about anything, his prayer will not be accepted for 40 days. Sahih Muslim. I can't help but wonder if my brush with the Ouija board was a test of faith, a reminder to trust in the divine plan rather than seeking answers from dubious sources. The question that keeps me up at night is, if I hadn't used the board, would those accidents have happened at all? The Midnight Visitor by Sarah Collins. I've never really told people about this. We had a huge closet full of old board games, and one of them happened to be a Ouija board. I always wanted to try it out, but my family was always home, and I felt weird trying it in front of them. There was this one weekend that my parents were going to the city, and my brother was going on a Boy Scout campout, so I would have the whole house to myself for a weekend. It might have been pathetic that I was more excited to try out a Ouija board than to party with friends while the house was empty. The weather was terrible, windy and rainy, but I felt that a rainy night would actually make it more ritualistic. Around midnight, I set up the board in my dining room and dimmed the lights. The shadows danced on the walls as lightning flashed outside, creating an eerie atmosphere. I placed my fingers lightly on the planchette, feeling a mix of excitement and apprehension. Is anyone there? I whispered into the darkness. Nothing. I asked a bunch of questions that generated no answers, so I eventually put the board away and went to bed. I woke up in the middle of the night to hear a creaking noise downstairs by the front door. At first I thought nothing of it, but then I heard it again, and it was closer this time, closer to the stairs. I sat up now, my heart beginning to race. At this point, I was getting concerned. Another creaking sound this time from one of the stairs. I was sure somebody was in my house. This was before cell phones were mainstream, so calling the police wasn't even an option. I clutched my blanket tighter, trying to calm my ragged breathing. The creaking sounds were getting closer until they were right outside my door, and then they just stopped. It felt like hours while I laid there clutching my covers, waiting for something to happen. A huge strike of lightning momentarily lit up my bedroom, and I swore I could see some kind of black limb-type objects wrapped around the open door. My blood ran cold as I tried to process what I'd just seen. I tried to hold my breath to be as quiet as possible, but what happened next was the worst part. My door suddenly slammed shut, and I couldn't help but let out a shriek. But now I was completely under my covers, shaking and crying and wanting to scream. All the windows in the house were closed, so there was no draft. I just knew something was going to happen, but nothing happens. I sat under my covers for hours, thinking somebody or something was in the room with me. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind outside made me flinch. I remembered a verse my grandmother used to recite, "Say, I seek refuge with the Lord of the dawn from the mischief of created things." I repeated it over and over, clinging to any sense of protection. When the sun started to rise, I finally snuck a peek out of my covers. My room was just as empty as before. The morning light revealed no signs of the terrifying limbs I thought I'd seen. I somehow found the courage to leave my bedroom and search for any signs of a break-in. Everything looked normal, though, no broken windows or unlocked doors. I then spotted the Ouija board on the table again. I have always been kind of superstitious, so I immediately linked the happenings to the Ouija board. I chucked the damn thing in the outside trash can and brought it out front to the curb. Since then, nothing has happened, and I didn't tell anybody about it. You wouldn't understand unless you were in that kind of situation. Then you would agree that nobody would believe a word you say. Nobody really knows, except for the people that read my story online. I know for a fact that those events were linked to the Ouija board. But sometimes late at night when the house creaks, I still wonder, what if it wasn't the board at all? What if something is still waiting in the shadows? The Flickering Lights by Alex Rodriguez. I can tell you from personal experience that trying a Ouija board is a huge mistake. It was the summer of 2013. My friends had a vintage Ouija board that was allegedly worth a decent amount of money. My friend agreed to trade it with me for a video game that I never played, so I happily made the trade. I tried using it alone, but it proved to be just a scam. I didn't really expect it to work. I mainly got it just for the money to be made off of it. I threw the stupid thing on the floor of my living room and forgot about it. Everything was going normal until the next morning. I woke up and found that the 2 plants I had sitting on my coffee table had been knocked over, and the Ouija board was sitting on the table. I didn't remember putting it there, nor did I understand how the plants could have fallen over. Wind was definitely not an answer. I wondered if it was possible that I had sleepwalked, or maybe I was half awake and walked down to get a glass of water and bumped into them or something. I moved everything back in place, but the carpet already had dirt stains on it. I brought the Ouija board box up to my room and tossed it on the floor. Things got bad that night. While laying awake in the dark, I was disturbed by the sound of a muffled click. I looked up, not sure what it was, and then I saw through the cracks of my closet door that my closet light was on. A chill ran down my spine. I had no idea how it could have turned on, but I got up and opened the closet door anyway. There was nobody in there, but that hadn't even crossed my mind. I turned the light off and jumped back into bed. My heart was pounding as I pulled the covers up to my chin. Probably 10 minutes later I heard the same clicking sound. Naturally, I looked to the closet and felt my heart sink a little. The closet light was on again. A mix of confusion and fear started building up inside of me. I once again turned off the light and cautiously got back in my bed. I found myself waiting for the closet light to click on again, but what happened instead was much worse. Instead of the closet light turning on, the whole room suddenly filled with light as I heard the main light switch flick. I had seen enough and was out the door within seconds. I raced down the stairs, my bare feet slapping against the cold wood. As I reached the living room, all the lights began flickering on and off rapidly. It was like being trapped in a terrifying strobe light. In that moment of panic, a verse from the Quran flashed through my mind. Allah is the light of the heavens and the earth. I clung to those words, desperately seeking any sense of protection from the chaos around me. The flickering intensified, growing faster and brighter, until I thought the bulbs might explode. I quickly pieced things together and chucked that old Ouija board in the closest dumpster. Nothing weird ever happened after that, but sometimes, when I'm alone in the dark, I still find myself tensing up at every little sound. Was it really just the board? Or did I invite something into my home that night? Something that's still waiting for another chance to make its presence known? I may never know for sure, but one thing's certain. I'll never mess with the supernatural again.